I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Where are our prophets now? Where are those messages God chooses to communicate divine revelation through? In the past, the Creator has sent prophets like Abraham, Siddhartha, Jesus, Muhammad, and many more. Maybe our higher power has switched tactics since we reinterpret God's words as soon as the Creator's prophets leave us. Could it be that Spirit talks to each one of us individually and we haven't learned to listen? On Words of the Prophets, our modern prophets show us how to find the internal prophet that is the I Am, and we discuss the application of spiritual principles in all aspects of our lives. Love and light, everybody. I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Today, very special guest, Dr. Harijot Singh Khalsa, who is a Shen master and the creator of Chinese Naturopathy. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, pleasure to have you. We're going to tell a little story before the show gets started, how we got together. But anyway, let me just do this today. Today's prophetic topic is the vital force of life. And this topic is from a teaching of the Great Law of Life by Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine. The teaching is as follows. Every living cell of an organized body is endowed with an instinct of self-preservation, which is sustained by an inherent force named the vital force of life. And what we're going to talk about today is how important that vital force is, not only to life, but to health, to healing, and across the board. I'm going to tell a quick story. I had a problem with I was dizzy, I don't know what you want to call it. I had vertigo or whatever the term is. And without getting into the long story, I got guided to Dr. Harijot here. Two others who I had known, I didn't know the doctor before this happened, for different reasons, which I call divine intervention, could not hook up with them. And then I just contacted my wife, who, again, I don't want to get too deep in the story, and she gave me a list of names. And the first three names, I said, no, that's not them, that's not them, that's not them. And she gave me the doctor's name, and I said, yeah, that's him. This is the guy I'm supposed to go see. And I was on a Thursday. I went in on a Saturday, and this man rocked my world. We're going to do a little demonstration later on down the show. It's called Pulse Readings. I walked into the office, and I was asked, are you here for a pulse reading? And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. You tell me, you know. And he just did his thing with my pulses, and we'll talk about why that's plural, and told me stuff about myself. I mean, it wasn't like he felt this extensive questionnaire about everything that's ever happened in your life. And he just told me things about my life, my health, my habits. It just blew me away. And I said, we got to get you on the air. And he said, sure. So I've talked enough. Tell us.
My story?
Your story. How did you become the wizard you are?
Well, growing up as a young man, our family physician was a homeopath, so an MD homeopath. So I was already introduced to the natural approaches to healing at an early age.
That must have been very rare.
It was rare. And that was when insurance companies were nonprofit and hospitals were nonprofit. I mean, you can think about the time period of that. And that would be in the late 40s and early 50s.
Back when doctors made house calls.
That's right, $10 to get to the house. And then I was a coach, a high school basketball coach, and then the injuries that we had of the ball players, we had a osteopath who would work on them. So I was introduced also to another approach to natural healing. So when I graduated high school, I started out in physical therapy, which was in its early stages at that time, and that was the beginning of my practice of natural healing. And I've been in this practice for over 50 years. And as time went on, I increased my knowledge, and in 1957 I studied naturopathy and got my ND degree. And as time went on, I became director of the school that I graduated from for physical therapy. For 20 years, I developed the programs of body work there. It was with the most prestigious school of massage therapy called the Swedish Institute. It's very well known. It began its practice of teaching natural therapies around 1906. So that was my beginning of re-educating myself and re-educating the public about massage. And at that time, we decided that people shouldn't be called masseurs or masseuses, and we created the term massage therapist. And that's when it all began in 1960, where people who practice massage was now known as massage therapists. And then, of course, as you see, everyone now uses that term. I spent some time in the military, in the Air Force, and then when I came out of the Air Force, I went back into practice. And I really wasn't totally satisfied with what I was doing, because I realized we were just treating the physical aspects of patients, their physical pain, their physical ailments, but we weren't reaching, I felt I wasn't reaching really the core of their problem, which was the emotion. That definitely played a part in a lot of the physical presentations that a patient gave us. And it happened that one evening around, as I left to take a walk, there was a fire in my neighborhood. And I was watching this fire, and there was this Chinese young man who was trying to study English. And I started to have a conversation with him, and he just said, well, my family just came from Hong Kong, and we have no friends here. Would you like to come visit my family? And I said, sure. And when I was at their home, I noticed in their living room there was a book that showed figures with dots on it, as we know now as acupoints. And I said, wow, they know something about physical therapy. Trigger point therapy is what we used to call that when we would treat certain painful areas. And the father said to me, no, this is a part of Chinese medicine, and it's called acupuncture. Well, it really enticed me, and I had to learn about it. But I didn't speak their language. So I had to learn how to speak Chinese, which took me a while, and it all worked out pretty well. So that's how I got into the practice of Chinese medicine. And let's see how we can go from there.
Well, let me ask you a question. How does this parallel spiritual practice? Because I mean, you're dealing with the body as one, you're dealing with the body as a life force. How did that impact you in your spiritual life, along with paralleling your, starting to learn more about how to help people heal? Right.
I started to learn the philosophies of Chinese medicine. And in Chinese medicine, there are three treasures, and it's called the qi, which we all know as that external prana or energy that runs along certain pathways. And then we have what's called the Jing, which is more or less the prenatal, I should say the postnatal energy of what we gather from our development during the pregnancy, and what we bring it with us into life. And then there is the spiritual energy that's called the Shen. And the way I look at it is that the qi nourishes the physical body, and then I learned how to use the Shen, which nourishes the spiritual body. And so what we're dealing with, and what I learned with Chinese medicine, is that the body, mind, emotion, and spirit are all one. And we, unfortunately, in the West, whether it's natural medicine or it's Western, as we say, allopathic medicine, we always seem to divert our energies and attention to the physical problem without going any further. And this opened up a whole door for me. And right now, I I have developed the practice of more so of Shen rather than just the treatment of the qi. It's some time ago, I'd say maybe about 10 or 15 years ago, I came into my office, and for some reason there was this manuscript that was lying on my desk, and it was called "The Goddess Meets Confucius." And in this manuscript, and I really to this day don't know how it got on my desk, and but it was meant for me to look into a different direction in working with people. And in this manuscript, and I'll just give you a small little synopsis of it, Confucius was concerned that his students were losing their sensitivity and understanding about family, about the spiritual aspects of life, and we're starting to move a little more into the material side. So he meditated on, and in those days he meditated with the I Ching, which also, unfortunately, was really not a Confucian thing. It was more of a Taoist thing. And lo and behold, this goddess came down from somewhere, and she said, "I am sent here by your deity to give you a way to help your students, to bring them in to connect them with their spiritual self." And that's how it all began. And that leads us to a difference between two types of Chinese medicine. What most of the practitioners study is traditional Chinese medicine. But what this opened up for me was classical Chinese medicine. And we can find there's a lot of research that tells us it goes back not 5,000 years as we learned about acupuncture and modern Chinese medicine. It goes back 12,000 years in the Taoist tradition. And what we can say is that there was a study of a group of people that came out of nowhere 12,000 years ago, you got to remember this, from who were tall, maybe 7 feet or taller, and wore suits that shone in the sunlight, and they were called by the Chinese the children of the reflecting light. We don't know where they came from, and they started to divide China into different sections, and some sections they would teach forms of exercise. Other sections of China they taught herbal medicine. Other areas they taught the concepts of connecting various areas of the body for healing, and also taught them what we called windows of the sky and windows of the heart. And it'll be a little difficult for me to go into all of that, but the whole concept was to connect the individual with their spiritual self, to make their connection of their divinity with the divine. Now, in traditional Chinese medicine, they would say that the physical problem calls for a change in their emotion. But in classical Chinese medicine, the emotion is what may cause the physical problem. So that's how Shen plays the part. And
how do you distinguish which is the chicken and which is the egg, so to speak? How do you know if it's the physical causing the emotion or the emotion causing the physical? Because I would imagine it can go both directions.
Well, by reading their pulses, we can tell whether the problem is physical, emotional, or spiritual. And in classical Chinese medicine, when we read a pulse, we take in consideration the time of their birth, their growing up years, their productive years, and what may happen as in their senior years. And we can sort of accomplish that by reading their pulses in a different way than one would be reading it in a traditional Chinese medical way.
And we're going to do that on camera in a little bit, but before we do that, can you go a little bit deeper into how this works, I mean, can you then, if I hear you correctly, you're able to, by the pulses, and there are 12 of them if I'm accurate?
That's correct.
And that...
But there's a little more to it than that. There's the intuitive aspect of this, not just reading it in a diagnostic way that you would read. For example, as you may hear a lot of terminology that you have a liver yin deficiency or a liver yang deficiency. That's traditional. But in classical Chinese medicine, we look for what we don't feel and what we don't see. So it's an intuitive aspect of it as well.
So there's an energy that should be there. When you don't feel it, you know something's blocking it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's part of it. And what could it be? Could it be something that may have happened when they were 5 years of age? Could it happen with something due to diet? Or could it be a trauma that they incurred somewhere that's emotional, that's causing their physical problem?
Are all of these tied into, in some form or another, the individual's karma?
That's a good question. There are times that you can feel, you get the flash that it could be because of something from possibly a past life. Yes. Or it could be their connection with somebody that may be a karmic reason for it, that brings people together. Or I can give you how I feel about the patients that I see. When I meditate, I ask the divine to only send me people that I can help, and that I can, how should I put it, sort of allow the divine to come through to be able to reach these people with the proper information that they may need. And that is a part of the Taoist system, the classical system.
But if this is basic energies,
well,
why would there be somebody you couldn't help?
Well, it's because they may not be ready. Well, that's a good question. They may not be open to this type of therapy, or this type of understanding, this type of philosophy.
So then you're just planting seeds, maybe.
Well, I prefer to see people that want to come and want to change their life, want to be, how should we say, sick and tired of being sick.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I'm asking the question, doctor, is because, you know, with my practice, which I just came to this understanding years ago that nobody shows up at my door by accident.
Correct.
You know, so
correct.
Because what I do is a little bit different than the norm, so to speak, and the people who are showing up are being guided there. You know, they wouldn't be showing up at my door if there wasn't something I had to offer.
Correct.
So that's why I was wondering why there would be somebody who would ever show up that you couldn't help.
Well, if I do find someone who does come by that I feel that I can't be of any help for them, I'll refer them to somebody that I think can. But here's something that's quite interesting is, I believe this, that individual chi belongs to that individual person, but the Shen, that spirit energy, connects with everyone throughout the world. It's a universal energy. The chi is an individual energy, Shen is a universal energy, and the Chinese Taoists knew that. And of course, a lot of them call some of their practice immortality, but it is. I mean, Shen is a form of immortality. You're connecting with everyone else in the world. Shen is universal. Chi is individual.
Is it the Shen energy that allows you to have that intuitive sense?
Quite a bit, yes. Because I do believe that that's what may be causing their shoulder problem, and maybe causing their digestive problem.
And it's your ability to tap into that allows you to read.
That's what I try to do, with the help of the divine.
Two questions. You said the three treasures. You're focusing a lot on the Qi and the Shen. What does the Jing really produce? What does it bring to the table, so to speak?
Okay, yes. As I said before, Jing is the postnatal energy. It's what maintains your vitality. It's what you brought in during the time of the when you were a fetus, and what you inherited from your parents. And so you have the genetic strengths and weaknesses that go back with your family. What you eat to maintain that reserve, to maintain the exercise you may need, the sleep that you may need. Everyone is different. I mean, you hear people who are 90 years old and never was sick in a day in their life, and they can have a cigar every day and a drink every day, and they're fine. Other people can't. It has to be based on their postnatal energy, and that's very important. In fact, in Chinese medicine, there is, during the pregnancy of the mom, if she wants to prevent any of that, how should I put it, genetic weaknesses that may occur from the parents and beyond, there's a form of acupuncture that we'll do while they're in their development of their fetus, that will filter out some of those weaknesses, and the baby would be born with a lot more postnatal chi or postnatal energy.
Well, I had this conversation. We touched on this. Last week's guest was Chris Grissom from Galisteo,
Mm-hmm.
and she was talking about that same thing. At what is the 7th month, you can do the acupuncture to make those adjustments, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Was it 5th and 7th month?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah. If I understood what you said correctly, by taking pulse readings, you can actually also predict the future health of an individual. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
You can, how should I put it? You can make the program for them to help them through some problems that they may have, so that they can live a more healthier and more vigorous life.
So these 12 meridians, how does this work? I mean, does like each one touch something major, or
Yes.
or they overlap, or?
Well, they do overlap, but what they represent is the large intestines, the lungs, the stomach, the spleen, the small intestines, the heart, the gallbladder, liver, and the bladder, and the kidneys. And then there are two non-organ meridians, which we call the triple heater, which I believe is very important in its play with the immune system. And we have 3 areas in Chinese medicine where energies are accumulated, and they're called the dantians. And we have the 3 dantians. And the lower dantian I call the gift of life. The middle dantian I call the gift of love, and the upper dantian I call the gift of light. And they each play a certain part, important energetic parts for the well-being of a person.
Do any of these meridians tell you about glands? Do any of these meridians
Yes.
tell you about chakras?
Yeah, yes, they can. And one thing I should say, that when you read a organ meridian, you have to know whether the condition is in the organ itself, or it's within the meridian, which is having difficulty of its flow.
I mean, what is a meridian? Is it like an energy tube, an energy channel?
Well, yeah. No one knows where it really has discovered where it is, but there was a Korean doctor who felt it lied parallel to the lymphatic system, and he that was his theory. And there are some gifted Chinese practitioners, especially those who practice Qigong and some of these martial arts, who actually see the meridians in various colors. And we really don't know where, I myself don't know really where it lies, but I think it lies between the skin and the fascia along the central nervous system and the brain and spinal cord and its peripheral nerves. I think there's a good relationship that it lies along those paths.
So we're going to do a live demonstration here.
Mm-hmm.
David, our camera person, has agreed to come on and be the recipient of readings.
Nice way to put it.
Can you explain what you're going to do? Is there a sequence to what you're doing?
Well, I do follow a sequence, and I start usually with the right wrist, and I look at all of the organ meridians that present itself there, and then I go to the left wrist and look at the organ meridians that present itself there, and then draw a conclusion of what I find, whether it's, again, physical, emotional, or spiritual.
Okay, and you'll be communicating with David as you're doing this?
Correct.
So, if David, you're ready?
I'm ready.
And Doctor, you're ready?
I'm always ready.
Okay.
All right.
Then I am just going to sit back and watch and maybe ask. Can I ask questions as it's happening?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you said you have
54.
54. All right, let's see what we find.
Do all the meridians meet at the same place?
No, there are 3 different divisions in the wrist. And there's a superficial division and a deep division, and actually there's a division between the 2. So the first thing I'm picking up on you is you're a little stubborn.
Anyone who knows me would say that's accurate.
What tells you that?
Oh, I just feel it. It's the flashes that come to you. And you have a tendency to eat the same foods all the time.
That's true.
And you're not getting the nutrition from the food you're eating, and you eat too fast. And you worry a little bit too much.
Pretty accurate.
And I don't know if you do enough exercise. Now we'll go to the other hand, see what we find there. Okay.
Are the points that you're feeling in
Yes.
the same spot on both wrists?
No. You know, you don't drink enough water.
Drink so much more than I used to.
Good, glad to hear it. I'm picking up a few things here. In your family, mother, father, was there problems with heart problems?
Yeah.
Right, because I'm picking up genetically you have that weakness.
Yeah.
And there must have been, and also I pick up some cholesterol problems as well. And I also pick up, do you get, how often do you get up at night?
Just once.
Once, okay. And is there a, I'm not going to anything that you wouldn't want anybody to know.
Sure.
Has you been thinking of moving or changing positions or jobs or changing homes or something like that?
No, I'm in the process of changing
Okay.
fields. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm picking up.
Yeah.
And you are working a lot with unresolved anger.
Very good.
Okay.
Very good. Thanks, Phil.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Doctor.
You bet.
So, we've watched this process. Can you?
What I would recommend for him is to really work cardiovascular, because there is that weakness there that he brought in genetically.
So more exercise.
More exercise, right. Diet would be important too.
So the fascinating thing I get from watching this is we're talking about how they run through major organs, yet you talk about physical manifestations. Can you explain how that gets converted? 'Cause I think it's marvelous.
I don't know if I can. The training that I get, I never went to school, because when I started to study Chinese medicine, there were no schools. So I had to learn from people, Chinese people and so on. That's why I learned how to, in those days, Cantonese was the language, so I learned how to speak Cantonese. And what you were learning from people whose practice was handed down from father to son, and father to sons, like that. And so, and when you gain the confidence of the people you're studying with, they'll give. Well, let me put it this way: the Chinese teacher will never give you 100%; they'll give you 75%, and you got to work for the other 25. And that's when you learn what to look for and what to read and where to look and who to see. And then eventually I went to Hong Kong to study, to try to get some credentials, whether I needed them or not, because people like to see something on a wall that you got some education.
Yes. Okay. I love that. How do you teach somebody to be intuitive?
I think everybody has it, and they're not sure of themselves. They're afraid. It basically, you have to really. The statement is, you have to go within that person, and actually, you have to ask their permission too. And it's flashes that you will get. And I think what helps a lot is for the individual to be more on the spiritual aspect of themselves, seeing the other dimensions that we don't see, that's there. It happens. Everybody has some of that ability. And you have to develop it and not be afraid of it. And I would suggest people who are interested is to get more involved with classical Chinese medicine in the Tao, and they'll see that it'll work. But you have to read a lot of pulses, and I've been doing it now for over 50 years. So now you learn. You get to know that person by just feeling their pulses, where they're coming from. After doing 15,000 pulses or something like that, you can integrate the energies that are coming from the person. But you remember Edgar Cayce? I mean, the sleeping prophet?
Yeah.
I mean, he connected just by
going in trance.
Yeah, right.
Fascinating stuff. So now,
I may not be answering your question. I'm sorry.
No, you are. Okay. I mean, brings you right into the next question then. Okay. You take a reading, you find out certain things. Now, that guides you in the placement of the needles for the acupuncture.
Correct.
Can you kind of give us an understanding of how that ties in?
Well, if I'm working with the Shen, then I'm working with the emotions that I pick up with the individual, like David is his name?
Yeah.
The unresolved anger. So I would be working with Shen patterns that would help him to release that unresolved anger.
So there was somewhere along the way somebody put together a book that says this is what you're feeling, this is the way you put the needles.
No.
Okay.
You will get to learn the windows of the heart, which ones have, well, let me put it this way. Each acupuncture point has an anatomy, means where it's located. It has its physiology of what it does, and it has the spirituality of what emotion it can be working with. And in combining them, you can wake up certain aspects of the individual.
How many points are there in a body?
Well, originally, this is interesting. Originally, there was 365 points. That's how it began. And it was related to 365 days in the year. When some research was done originally, when people looked at the 365 points without the meridian lines, this is going back supposedly 5,000 years ago or so. They would see the constellations of the sky very similar to how the points were laid out in a map, without the longitudinal and lines and so on that related to the meridians. Where did that come from? And I firmly believe it came from these children of the reflected light. Why did they pick the Chinese people? Because they were more highly civilized compared to Europe, what was going on in the European countries, in the Dark Ages and all of that stuff.
Any idea why they divided China up into all those different subsections, so to speak?
Yes. In the South, because there was more relationship to, I guess because of the weather, herbal growth.
Okay.
The North was colder, so they created what we call heating, moxa as it's known, the heating techniques. In the East, like in Shanghai areas, more exercise programs began. And but overall, they all learned about the windows of the sky and the windows of the heart. But over the years, it was lost because people of nobility and rich people wanted these concepts for themselves. So a lot of it was lost. And I rediscovered it when I got this manuscript that I have no idea how I got it. One day I came into my office and it was there on my desk.
When the divine wants us to have something,
Correct.
We'll have it.
Right.
So let's back up a little bit more to the acupuncture aspect of it. And you talked earlier also about trigger point.
Right.
So trigger point is like pressuring the point without actually putting the needle in?
Well, trigger points developed in physical therapy, where certain painful areas would cause pain somewhere else. And these trigger points were small, circumscribed areas of high, I guess you could call it contractions of the muscle, which put pressure on the nerves. And the brain would pick up that trigger point, but would send the message somewhere else in the body as pain. And surprisingly, a lot of these trigger points, and there are many of them, will also be an acupuncture point. You will find a acupuncture point on the same area.
So if I have 12 energy channels running through me, they are susceptible to blockages that would have an impact on an organ up or downstream, but not necessarily where the blockage would be then.
Well, that's in a way that's true. Basically, it's all reflexive, in a way. In fact, there are some practitioners that just use the ear, and it's called auricular therapy, because they believe the ear, if you look at it, it looks like an upside-down fetus. And physiologically, there are three cells that develop there, the endoderm, mesoderm, and the ectoderm, and they represent various areas of the body. Cells, when they develop in the fetus, have an intelligence to know where to go and what to develop. So there is a belief system that these cells also find themselves in the person's ear, and therefore you can represent the various organs of the body in the ear, and they're treated either primarily with electrotherapy or with needles. And so you do get the results anywhere else in the body. So a lot of it is reflexive. As I said, the acupuncture point has its anatomy, and it has its physiology, and it has its spirituality. And I'm using more of the spiritual aspect of that acupuncture point than its physical aspect.
So is that based upon a belief that the spirit is the most powerful energy, and if we could get that vibrating higher, so to speak, the rest of the body will follow in tune?
I think so. I think that's what that's the way I see it, and I think that's the way the Taoists saw it as well.
In all of this work that you do, is there any hands-on or hands-off energy work that you do with people?
Well, I use a lot of the aspect of physical therapy, which is electrical medicine. I use a lot of electrotherapy for certain things, but there is a lot of physical treatments that you can find in Chinese medicine. Various forms of massage is known as ama and tui na. Ama means press and rub and press, and tui na means push and pull. So there are a lot of techniques in the physical aspect of Chinese medicine, and I think Chinese medicine basically is a form of physical therapy. And how it was introduced to the West was because of a French diplomat who spent time in China and was very intrigued about all these various techniques, and he brought it back to France and wrote some books about it. And France was maybe the first country that started to use acupuncture, and Vietnam, of course, when they were involved with Vietnam as well. And then when he taught all the physicians, how to do it, they wouldn't let him practice. I mean, it's just an interesting metaphor there.
Is there any mechanism? I mean, if we are all the same energetic beings, so if this is an accurate statement, I mean, I have Shen and you have Shen.
Right, we're all full of Shen.
Yes. Can any one of us transfer or connect our energy to somebody else's to raise them up?
Well, when you meet somebody, why do you feel a kinship or a relationship to them?
I thought that was purely karmic.
Well, I think some people say it's chemical, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's the Shen, and the connection you may have had also in a past life. That's when it's karmic.
Okay, but can I use my Shen to help somebody else whose Shen is weaker, for instance?
Well, you are doing that when you counsel someone.
So what you're saying is there's a transference of energy even without physical contact?
Correct.
Okay.
There's a Japanese system called Jo-Rei, which is using the divine light in treating people. And they don't even touch you, but they send that divine light to the person.
Yeah, there's a place over here on Alto Street, I think.
No, right next to my office.
Oh, okay.
Right.
And there's also, there was a woman I had as a guest about a year or so ago, Seimei, which is the same thing, which is an energy practice.
Right. Well, you have Jo-Rei, you have Reiki, but I mean, they will put hands on the body. And then you have something called Shinjitsu, That's another energy body work, Japanese. What we're looking at, there's only one truth, right? And it has a lot of paths to get to that truth.
Yeah, exactly. On your website, which is a wonderful website, we've been flashing that periodically, you talk about 10 psychic bodies.
Mm-hmm.
How does that relate to the 12 pulses?
Well,
And what are the 10 psychic bodies?
the psychic bodies could be considered the energy centers, the chakras. It could deal with the aspects of an individual, where but more with the emotions that have been cut off, and that would be more in the physical areas. And I find more of and I relate it more to the herbal formulas that we have for that. Just sort of like your flower remedies, which work on these energy bodies, these centers. And I use them from time to time.
You mentioned the chakras, the 7 in traditional.
Right.
There's 7 chakras,
Right.
majors, there's minor chakras.
Right.
Is that what encompasses the major and the minor make up the 10?
Well, that's a very interesting. Remember I mentioned that there are 2 meridians that are not organ meridians.
Yeah.
And the one that I would say that would work, that we use, is what we call the governing vessel, which runs along the spine. And then, for example, between the 3rd and 4th vertebrae, lumbar vertebrae, that's governing vessel 4, that's considered a longevity point that helps move all the energy and to give a person the reserve energy that they need to strengthen that postnatal energy. And also, I relate that particular point to the adrenals. Don't we hear people saying, "Oh, my adrenals are just exhausted"? You see,
Yeah.
and that's one point that will help us increase the vital force in that particular gland.
Can acupuncture be used to align and open all the chakras?
Well, that's a good question, and that's a question in reference to the windows of the sky and the windows of the heart. Not everybody is ready to have everything open. They have to be grounded first. We have to see that there is, and the key word is balance. There has to be a balance between their body, mind, emotion, and spirit, and then we can open them up to the higher levels of spirituality.
So if I am not capable of handling the energy, it can create more problems
Correct.
than it would solve.
Correct.
So we have to be careful what with doing.
Correct.
I want to touch on something else you and I have done. You had asked me, it was amazing. It's like, I mean, in the past, I remember years ago going to the doctor's office, you fill out these lengthy forms which ask you like 46 trillion questions you don't know the answers to, and you fake it.
Right.
The only question you asked, besides some contact information, was my time of birth. And you touched on that briefly. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Oh, sure. Right. In constitutional therapy, which we use herbs for, it is based on the time, on the day, month, and year that a person was born. And what that tells us is that during the time that the individual is in the womb, each month that they're in the womb, an organ meridian develops. But they're only in the womb, like 30, maybe about 9 months. So 2.5 meridians do not develop while they're in the womb. They develop outside the womb. And so there's weaknesses that may develop because of that. So we use herbal formulas to give that balance to those 2.5 meridians that haven't been created while they're in the womb. That's called embryonic Chinese medicine. Now, the time of birth, the time you're born, that's there is a cycle, a 2-hour cycle that energy changes. And with the time that you were born, you're calling on that energy of that time for your healing, for you to come out of the womb. And I use that energy in the form of, say you were born during the time of the large intestine's meridian energy, okay? That's coming around on that cycle. Well, I use that energy to help people to strengthen their immune system in acute problems. And I use the constitutional remedies for the 2.5 meridians that are not developed to strengthen their constitution on a long period of time.
Fascinating.
And it's amazing to me that every time we do this, the person says, "Yes, I have that problem." So I can't give a scientific reason why.
Which is probably good
Yes.
testimony for it.
Yes, we do.
I got to cut away for a couple seconds. I got to make a couple of announcements. We're running down on time. When we come back, I want to just touch on one last thing, which is preventative as opposed to curative. Okay, so this is public access TV, and you, the public, are why we're here. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have a show. We wouldn't be on the air. So we'd like to get you involved. Love to hear comments, questions. Contact the guests. We give information to contact them. In this particular case, if you have an ailment, you're having problems with traditional medicine, get a hold of Dr. Harijot. For me, the man's a miracle worker. That's all I'm going to say. But I'd love to hear from you also. Is there anything that you'd like to have clarified? If there's any shows that you'd like to see me do, maybe there is a show you'd like to do with me you think would fit in here. Contact me. My contact information has been flashing on the screen. It will be at the end, the closing credits. You'll see it there too. Love to hear from you. Also, to let you know, I am a spiritual counselor. I believe that kind of what the doctor and I were talking about, that without a spiritual component, we do not heal. In the therapeutic sense, trying to fix what's the problem with the same instrument that's created the problem is not going to work. We need to bring the spirit into the healing, and that's what I do. So if there's any life problems that you are experiencing and you want to try something maybe just a little bit new and different than what you've been trying that hasn't been working, call me. I work on a donation basis, so money is never an object. Would love to talk to you. We can, just talk on the phone for a while. You can come into my office. We can talk. There's lots of ways to invoke the spirit to heal, and that's what I do. So let me be your guide if you think that's going to work for you. Next week, Reverend Gail Dillon is going to be our guest. She has that new, my brain just went dead. You got something sticking me to make my brain work? She has the new congregation, religious science congregation. I believe that they are meeting currently at the Women's Club, and we're going to talk about them and also 12-step and how all that ties together and to come to a spiritual practice. So tune in next week and see that show. That's about all the announcements. So let's talk about the healing and the preventative.
Okay. What I put together was my Chinese knowledge of Chinese medicine and my knowledge of naturopathic medicine. I combined them both. And what we're saying here is I took the best of the East and the best of the West in natural healing. And yes, both of these practices are should be preventative medicine practices. Get to the person before they get into a chronic situation, which doesn't seem to make them put them in any better space than where they should be.
So let me pop in here just for a second. So let's go back to the beginning. You can take a pulse reading that can say, okay, you're not having a symptom now, but based upon what you're feeling in the pulse, something's going to happen somewhere down the road.
Yeah, well, like I told David that there is a genetic weakness of heart disease. So he has to be, I'm not saying it's going to happen to him, but he has to be ready, he has to be prepared.
So that preparation can include acupuncture to help strengthen that aspect, and then...
And the naturopathic approach would be vitamins, minerals, herbs, exercise, and whatever else we can think that they need.
Okay. So, I mean, so somebody doesn't have to be hurting or ill to come to you.
No.
It's a lot better to come to you and just say, read me and see what comes out of that.
Right, and what I'm happy to do for anybody who watches your program, I'm happy to read their pulses at consultation free. As long as they mention your program, I'll be happy to see them and at no charge.
Well, thank you. You hear that? What more can you get out of watching public TV than, it doesn't get any better than this. That is fantastic. I want to touch on one thing that you did for me that was really fascinating to me. Was you sensed there was a little bit of a weakness in my thyroids. Mm-hmm. You actually had me take my temperature, mm-hmm. and then you gave me an electric pulse for that. And there was also, you did electric pulse on the bottom of my feet on a separate occasion. Mm-hmm. We only have about a minute and change. Can you kind of give us a quick synopsis of how that works?
Right. For the thyroid, I use what we call a microcurrent, which is a current that works in stimulating cellular activity. So therefore, if the thyroid is sluggish or borderline underfunctioning, it will stimulate their activity. For what we did on the bottom of the feet is to stimulate a key point called kidney 1, which helps to work as a form of elimination, to eliminate any of the waste products. That's even being a little too. But it stimulates the activity of all the organ meridians and allows the toxins to be eliminated via the kidneys.
So the electric pulses can actually, because there's electricity in the body, it helps it.
Right, and the current that we use is natural to the body.
Excellent. Doctor, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's a pleasure having you here. I hope everybody, you may have thousands of people showing up at your door.
That'll be nice.
That would be nice. Yes, mm-hmm. A healthier Santa Fe.
That's right.
Want to thank you all for tuning in. This is Reverend Phil. This is Words of the Prophets. We are here every week, same time as you're watching me. We're on 4 times a week, so if you miss me, you can catch me again. You've got the ability to make your life what it is. People can guide you, people can do things for you, but you've got to do the footwork. You've got to call upon the Spirit. So do that. Change your life. You're getting opportunity here that I think is fantastic. Go give Doctor a call and let him tell you what's going on with you. So until next week, know you are divine. Use it. Let it happen. And walk in love and light. We'll see you next week. Blessings to you all. I'm Reverend Phil, and I've been your host for Words of the Prophets. Thank you for tuning in. Please join me again next week, same time, same channel, for more Words of the Prophets.